Hello, everybody, and welcome to this incredible session, Map Your Ties, How to Tap into Your Community. My name is Isis Krause. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Philanthropy Together, and we're thrilled to have you in this space. If you joined us this morning, you were probably in a webinar style situation. Today, it's a meeting. We're with each other. If you are able to turn your videos on, we'd love to see some of your beautiful faces in the space with us. And this will be a pretty interactive activity as well, which I think we all really enjoy. Philanthropy Together is a global field catalyst for collective giving. We strive to unite and catalyze and strengthen collective giving of all forms. And today is all about mapping your ties. We're going to do the thing that you always tell yourself that you're going to do it, and then you never take the time to actually do it. So today is the day where you're going to sit down and actually do it. And I'm so excited for you to be able to do that. We have two incredible speakers with us, the incomparable Hali and Letarik Amare from Radiant Strategies, who I also have the sincere pleasure of working with on a very regular basis. Thank you two ladies for being here with us in this space. I'm going to hand it over to you after some quick housekeeping, which is that you can click on the closed captioning if you would like it. It's enabled at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And please stay till the end of the session. We'll have a very brief 2-question evaluation for you all to close out the space. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Hali and Letarik. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you. And I'm really glad that I can actually see some faces. And I see Crystal and Claire and Tootie, and that's just on slide 1. Thanks for being here. So I think Letarik and I get to, and my name is Hali. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently sitting in Brooklyn, New York, though I spent a lot of time in New Mexico where my mom and dad are elderly. And we get to talk today about ties, 5 T's: time, talent, treasure, testimony, ties. And I know you're not really supposed to pick a favorite child or T, but ties is actually kind of my favorite T, and ties are the ties that bind us together. Letarik, so I'm going to share a little bit about my giving circle, collective giving journey in a way, and then I'm going to hand it over to Letarik, who's going to share more about this Freedom School for Philanthropy curriculum, where we're going to share an exercise with you guys that we use in this beautiful book that, I'm randomly going to be doing this while we talk. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to share a story about ties that I think is a really great use case in a way. So years ago, I'm a member of lots of different circles, groups, communities, and one of them is the Women Donors Network, which is a network of women donors in the United States. It's not really global yet. And years ago, they do a lobby day, and I wasn't on this one, but I heard about it. And I think it was in the state of Sacramento. The members of Women Donors Network in California were going on a lobby day to the state capitol to talk about women and girls, gender, et cetera, with elected officials. One of the women members had arranged to have a 15 or 20-minute conversation with one of her elected representatives. She's a donor to this representative's campaign, so she got access, had good access, and was able to secure a pretty, long meeting for a day like that. She brought with her an activist, an organizer, someone who runs an organization who's working on the issue that they were talking about, and I don't remember what it was. So she shows up to this meeting with the legislator, with this executive director with her. And after making some niceties about, kids and how are you and how's the blah, 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 she ceded her time to the organizer, the executive director who was with her to meet with that elected representative. What I love about this story is that legislator might not have taken the meeting with the executive director organizer because that person, though an important community member, isn't wealthy, but that legislator took the meeting because the person who arranged it was a member of the Women Donors Network and had been a major donor to that person's campaign. So to me, that's such a great way of using your ties in a way that advances common values and common actions in the community that we all care about. So that's just so as you're thinking about the exercise that we're going to do together in a little bit, remember that story, and maybe you've got one to share of a way that you've been able to use your ties in a way that advances something you care about in your community, and drop it in the chat. Isis asked us to talk a little bit about, asked me to talk a little bit about the Asian. Oh, hi, Sophie. You just popped into my screen too. Hello. Talk a little bit about the Asian Women Giving Circle. We turned 17 years old this year, which I can't even believe. We've moved almost $1.5 million collectively in an all volunteer manner to Asian American women, girls, and gender expansive people in New York City who are using the tools of arts and culture to bring about equitable social change in their communities. And we're going to have a big all-day grantee convening on June 26th. I can't wait. It's something we've been dreaming about doing almost since the very beginning, and finally we're going to get our butts in gear and do it. But the projects that we fund have been documentary films, spoken word, an opera, believe it or not. Slanty-Eyed Mama, whose real name is Kate Rigg. We have funded her a few times. She's a spoken word, Juilliard-trained classical musician who does buto dancing and profane and profound performance. She called us aunties cheering her on the sidelines. It's the first time our grant to her, we funded her multiple times, is the first time she told me that they'd ever gotten funding from someone who looks like them, because in the funding world there aren't a lot of Asian American funding vehicles. It's actually one of the things I'm most proud of in this work, that she and others think of us as aunties cheering on the sidelines. And if you think about the typical kind of funder, donor, and doer space, it's not often that kind of tie, that closest to community shows up in that way. And it's another example of the ties and the closeness that lots of giving circles like I Hope Mine can be close to the communities that we're part of and that we're also sending money into. And I know in my case, even though New York City is a big city, the lines between who we are as the people raising the money and giving it away and that line between donor and doer is actually less of a line and more like a, I don't know, squiggly line or a smudged charcoal rather than a Sharpie. It's there's a power dynamic inherent certainly in what we do. But I think in lots of giving circles cases, not all, but hopefully many of us are trying to smudge that line a little bit. The last thing I'll share before handing it over to Letarik is that I'm writing a book called The Big We. I turned in, it's right here. This is my manuscript. I turned it in last night at 2 in the morning. I'm a little tired. And it'll be out in 2025. A lot of you guys have heard me talk about it. A lot of your stories are in this book, and it's a book told in lots of stories of people putting their time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties together in order to do good shit, good work, good values aligned actions in their communities to make our world more free, more fair, more just for all. So invite me back last year and we can talk about it. I think I am now handing it over to Letarik, who's going to share a little bit about Radiant's a big project we're doing, which is Freedom School for Philanthropy. And Isis, Letarik, and I are the proud mamas of Freedom School for Philanthropy. So I'll toss it to you, friend.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I did move my screen to gallery view because I'm like, these beautiful people are putting I need to see these faces. So Tootie and Sophie and everybody, thank you so much for being here. Ty, Sara, Kelsey, Isis, Melissa, I see you on here too. And thank you so much for the opportunity. As Holly said, I'm Letarik Amare. I work alongside Holly and Isis here on the call at Radiant Strategies. And Radiant is a little bit of a boutique consulting firm. So we do the traditional, like middle of the road consulting and strategy work. And when we're not doing that work, we are what I like to call applied researchers, because so often our projects that we're mamas of are byproducts of hunches that we have. And so one of our previous projects was Donors of Color Network, and we had a hunch about how much money folks of color, high net wealth folks of color were moving in this country. And pursued that and built a network, and now it exists in the world. And Hali, Isis, and Sada, and many others were part of a brain trust that brought PhD and giving circles into the forefront of so many people's minds, and it now exists in the world. And Freedom School for Philanthropy, which is our donor ed curriculum, exists for that same reason. And so Freedom School is a project that we built with movements at the center. And at its inception, we interviewed movement leaders and organizers, big and small, all across the United States, because it is a donor curriculum based within the US context. And so it's women like Aijen Poo, Vanessa Daniel, and Say Ufad, and the likes. And we asked them about what it looked like to be in right and good relationship with donors. And with their guidance and some of those named attributes, we built out a hefty curriculum. And so there are 9 different attributes, or virtues rather, that span across 3 different sections. And I was not kidding around. Here's the workbook. She's hefty, nearly 3,000 pages, 9 different chapters. And they span across 3 different sections, as I said, the me, the we, and the big we. So the curriculum starts in freedom, where we ask donors, and we built this curriculum with actually high net wealth white donors in mind. And so we ask them, what does freedom look like? And then from there, they move into values, where they have the opportunity to name values. We move them into power, where they have the opportunity to interrogate their relationships with power and what it means to wield it and yield it, and give it away. And then in the we section, we work through compassion, courage, accountability. In the big we, which is our final section, we move through transformation, abundance, and community, which is actually the virtue we'll be talking about today. And community is about how can you bring family, friends, and community into the vision of a restored collective. So our hope when we built this thing was that donors would come out of this experience ready to embrace their role as organizers, as folks who are eager to not only to mobilize their dollars, but also exist in communities in ways that they haven't previously, and hopefully cross-race, cross-class, transformational, and in better relationship with movements. And so by equipping them with political education, some grounding in history, and with an introduction to what we call people-powered philanthropy, they're ready to engage with philanthropy in more transformative ways. So Holly, I'll actually pass it back to you to run through community.
Okay, cool. I know it's hard when you don't have the book, but I wanted to just say that the community chapter is a bookmark to the beginning. So we end in community, but we start actually with this quote, Fannie Lou Hamer, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." You guys have all heard it. It's probably backwards on your, I don't know if you can see it, but she was a really well-known farmer, civil rights person, voting rights, women's rights icon. She was the vice chair of the Freedom Democratic Party, co-founder of the National Women's Political Caucus, and one of the organizers of Mississippi's Freedom Summer. And we start with her because, first of all, we should just always remember this. Nobody's free until everybody's free. Like I've also heard it said, like, my freedom is bound up in yours. For those of us, and it's sort of like we're recognizing that many of us who are trying to do social change work stand on the shoulders of Black women, African-American people who have led freedom movements in this country, joined by Asian American people, Latino people, queer people, folks of color, immigrants, always, to make this country live up to its highest ideals and dreams. We close the Freedom School for Philanthropy experience or learning with community. And it's a nice bookmark because if my freedom is wrapped up in yours, it presumes a we, it's presuming a group, it's presuming community. It's not, I am the sole hero that's going to impose my vision onto you. It's like, we've got to do this thing together. When we were thinking about this final chapter, in a way, of this curriculum, Isis, Letarik, and I, and Tootie has been a facilitator of Freedom School, Tootie Scott, who's on the call, for most of the cohorts that we've done 6 now. We were thinking about what does it mean for donors on the donor side to be in community with movement leaders and executive directors? What's the thing that donors can bring to the table, to the social change table? And the thing, in my opinion, the thing that donors can do that no one else can do around that social change ecosystem, that social change table, the only thing donors can do that only they can do is organize their peers. And we know that peer organizing is maybe the most effective way, maybe the only way to move wealthy people, to move other wealthy people to do the right thing in the world. As they even, we've seen sometimes wealthy individual donors who is the primary audience for this curriculum. They have staff often, people publish these giving lists. They might read a lot of books, but the most effective thing is when one person who's a peer, who's considered a peer, talks to another person who's considered a peer. That's the most effective way to make change. So we include this community chapter at the end of Freedom School with the hope that some of the people who go through it will step into that role of becoming a donor organizer. Related to this idea of peers organizing peers, donors organizing donors, is this idea of solidarity. And solidarity is this idea, it's just what we do. And we try to do it. It's standing up alongside, sometimes behind, as in support of, sometimes in front, as in protection, and sometimes arm in arm. Letarik and I were part of the founding staff of the Donors of Color Network. And I got to lead a piece of research that a lot of you guys have heard me talk about, the Portrait Report, which is a qualitative research project where I've interviewed almost 150 wealthy people of color across the country. And and a lot of people said you can't do it. There's no such thing as donors of color network. Like there's no proof. In fact, Urvashi, Ashini, and I were told multiple times by very, well-known people, there's no proof that this is going to work, this isn't going to work. Like, what evidence do you have that people of color can stand up with each other and alongside each other to build something together and in common? And it's true, there was no proof because it hadn't been done before. But the fact remains that it's really important that it be done. And it's really important that people of color with wealth have a philanthropic home, a political home, hopefully, where they can move their values in the world together. And one of the things that we were hoping that we would find is that we could find the connections across difference. We could find the things that we had in common. And we knew that there would be some moments when I, as an Asian American, Korean American woman, would have to stand behind in support of my Latina brothers and sisters in that network when something was happening in their community. And there were other times when they would have to stand in support of me, or that we would have to stand alongside our queer brothers and sisters in that community, because we know that attacks and bad laws and bad things against our communities are going to just be coming down the pike. We know that's a fact. So what is the thing that we can do to just be in relationship, in community with people who aren't like us, who we don't share lived experiences with? And we can be sensitive to those moments when sometimes I need to be up front talking about this thing that's happening to me and my communities. And other times I need to be in back supporting Sada and her communities because of what's happening to her. And other times I really need to be arm in arm with Sophie because of what's happening in Seattle with Sophie's community. And other times I need to be arm in arm and on the phones and on the streets with my buddy Letarik because of what's happening with her people. So that's the idea of solidarity. And the flip side of that is that we know that division is a tool to separate and divide is a very good tool. It's a very useful tool, and it's a very effective tool to prevent us from pooling our resources, pooling our power, pooling our ties, coming together to achieve the things that we want to achieve. So I just, we just have to see it. And when we see it, we have to not do it. There are attempts to divide us and drive wedges between us always. It's a very good strategy, but we have to stand up together, united against this tendency and this tactic. Let's pause for a second. who wants to say something? Does anyone have something they want to add or say in the chat or off mic? Please, I don't want to listen to just me and Letarik talk this whole time. And let's just take a minute to talk about anything you want to really, or put it in the chat, and then we can move to our exercise. Aurora, you wrote a lot. Would you please come off mute and say what you wrote or add a comment to it?
Hi, Haley. Yes, sorry, I can't be on video. Hello, hello.
Okay.
Wow, I'm so excited to hear about this. Very familiar with the Donors of Color Network. I, have a formerly undocumented youth story. I've been in fundraising and development for 16, 17 years. And most recently, the last 2 years, started, my own consulting practice. And even though my heart is with the Black and Brown led social justice groups, helping them build capacity and raise the dollars, immediately coming back to the state that raised me, that being Florida, recognizing that, philanthropy here looks very different, but also seeing the potential and just constantly. But what I wrote was just kind of speaking to that frustration that who is speaking to the donors of color, who is talking to them through a cultural lens. Very often consultants and advisors to philanthropy do not look like us. And so I was just basically echoing what you were saying, and also, I guess, naming the fact that, as a small business owner or someone that's, just trying to get a practice off the ground, those doors are often not open. I think we need more mentorship. I think we need more of, big entities, whether it's community foundations or whether it's, the Fidelities of the world or what have you, to understand that there is a role for folks to cultivate donors and speak to donors, through that lens, and that we are of value. But I was just naming the fact that that just doesn't come easy. And in from my vantage point, we recognize more dollars need to be liberated for the work. And we know the money exists in a city like Miami. And so it's how do we find those homes that allow us to do this work that you're speaking about? And it's not easy. We need homes that are actually going to support us and help us and pay us and hire us to do this work. So just naming that. Thank you.
Aurora. Thank you so much for saying that. And yes, I'll just name a couple resources, and then maybe later one of us can drop them in the chat. DNUN, Crystal Tompkins, who's on the call, has joined Daylight Advisors, which was started by DNUN, who a bunch of us know, and it's an Advisors of Color network. Crystal, maybe you can drop a better version of what it is in the chat. 2164, Andine Sutarjadi, who's a Giving Circle sister of mine. She's wonderful. She's also 2164 also has an Advisors of Color cohort model where the people go through an experience together. And Crystal's going to drop something about the Daylight Advisors of Color, their cohort model. And then Donors of Color, there's only one Donors of Color. It's a national network. I personally, I think there should be 100. Aurora, I think you and all of us can do some activating or nudging or hectoring or badgering our local community foundations, because most community foundations have in their missions that they are supposed to be building philanthropy in their communities of concern. And that does not mean focusing only on white people. So there have been a couple of community foundations around the country that are trying. I haven't talked to them in a while, but the Texas Women's and a lot of women's foundations sort of function as community foundations. The Texas Women's Foundation has a Latina circle, an Asian American circle, 2 Black circles. I think Thai is part of one of them. And they had a Muslim American giving circle. And last I checked, they had a queer women's giving circle as well. So you guys know better than I do, PhD folks, but I think in my old info, they're head of class in terms of a community foundation that's really trying to walk the talk. And Aurora, I don't know what's happening in Miami, but take the data that is in the report that Philanthropy Together just released, along with Leighton and you guys have it. Take that to your community foundation and use it as evidence for them to put some dollars behind building philanthropy in their community of concern, because Giving Circles have raised over $3 billion in the last 5 years. And we're on track to double as a movement in the next 5 years. And $3 billion in this most recent landscape is almost certainly underestimate of the dollars moved, because as we know, a lot of us aren't like doing this for tax credits and charitable contributions. So anyways, just some
Yes.
ideas. Yeah.
And just one other point is that even beyond giving circles, one of the learnings from the report is that so often donors of color are not organized because they're simply not asked to belong to any of these communities. And I know for certain that within a community in a city like Miami, that's certainly not the case. And so what does it mean to do the work? I believe it should be both houses, like both the programmatic and the financial houses of the community foundation, to like chip away at those biases in order to ensure that they that folks of color can more meaningfully belong to those homes.
Jordan from Liberty Hill, you want to say something? And then I think we'll move into this exercise, and then we'll come back and we can talk again. So Jordan, will you come off mute and speak?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay. Yeah, Jordan Haynes, Liberty Hill Foundation. Apologize as well. I can't be on camera right now, but I just wanted to speak on how inspirational I find this. And at Liberty Hill Foundation, which is based in Los Angeles, and we do work throughout California, we recently saw, unfortunately, the disbandment of our Black Giving Circle, the Black Leaders in Cultivating Change, due to just capacity issues of our donors who are leading that work. And we are restructuring our fundraising team to move into a more, just to give more support to our giving circles. But I think what this does is kind of release a bit of uncomfortability in myself as a Black man, as a Black fundraiser, that it's really easy for us because we're meeting our fundraising goals to feel really comfortable with our primary like white donors of wealth in Los Angeles. Therefore, it's like, oh well, we're meeting our fundraising goals. We're meeting what we, what we want to get from our donors. But this makes me feel even more we have an obligation, like a moral obligation, especially as a social justice foundation, to engage people of color. Like, what is our mission if we are leaving them off the table? Doesn't matter, if we're meeting our fundraising goals. But who are we at the end of the day if we are not engaging people of color? How are we how are we thinking about wealth um, and the breakdown of race and ethnicity in Los Angeles? And so I just think, this is even more reason why we need to engage our donors of color and let them know that they have a voice and a right to speak into the programmatic work that we do. And I'm really excited to hear more about this. So thank you so much for what you guys are speaking on.
Thank you, Jordan, for bringing your voice into the room. I'm sorry that's happening over there. I'm a big fan, a lot of us are, of Liberty Hill and other social justice foundations. I hope that you can find community here or with other people who are having similar struggles in their hometowns with their community foundations, and let me know if I can help. Isis, should we switch over to this exercise now? I think Isis is going to share her screen, and then you guys are going to get a link, and we're going to spend some quiet time doing this 6 degrees of separation exercise, and then we'll come back together and share. Okay, so can you guys all see this? And I think, and Isis just dropped a link. So the idea, or Isis, are you going to tell people how to do the make a copy thing, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So just like classic Google Docs, as you enter, if you click this little file button and then make a copy entire presentation, that should pop up in your own drive. It'll make a copy, and then this new version, which will say copy of in there, and it'll literally be your own copy. No one on this Zoom will be able to see your link. And that's because what you're going to do here is pretty personal. You're going to actually write people's names in these boxes. And so we wanted to make sure that it was private for you. Go ahead, Holly.
Okay, so there's a bunch of boxes and they're labeled. So just to share a couple of mine, for example, like political and government connections, I have a friend from college who happens to be a New York State senator. So I would put Brian Kavanaugh in there. If you have a friend of a friend who is a city council member, put that person in there. If for work and business connections, like you might put in, for me, Teresa Younger is a neighbor and a friend, and she runs the Ms. Foundation. Well, I happen to have a lot of foundation and philanthropic connections because I've been doing this for so long. Voluntary and associational connections might be a fraternal or a sororal organization, or it could be like a parent teacher association, adult sports league, a book group. Faith-based is pretty obvious, and educational means like alumni, or even if you have kids, if they go to school and if they go to private school, say, and they have connections you have connections from the other parents, stick those in there. So I think we're going to take like 10 minutes quietly. Is that right, Isis, Letarik? Okay.
That's
We're
right.
gonna take 10 minutes. Make a copy, do it yourself, and print it and keep it, whatever you want to do. Letarik's going to play a little music, and then we'll come back and share what we discovered about ourselves in 10 minutes.
And I would just add that the reason why these are separated by these buckets is so that your brain can, at this moment, actually compartmentalize all of the relationships that you hold and the second and third and fourth degree connections that you might have, because sometimes we tend to think of just our inner circle of people, and this really helps you push to that next and next and next level. So really take the time, like, 2 minutes each, and try to go as far out in your zone of influence as you can, and to the greatest degree of influence that you can. Like, this is not a space to be shy. Really, really go for it with who are the second degree connections that you know.
Have fun. Okay. Pencils down. I feel like it's like exam time or something.
Kidding. What surfaced for you all as you were working through the exercise? Where do you see an over index? What boxes are smaller? We'd be curious to see and hear. And we can do this popcorn style. So take yourself off mute and go for it.
If I know you, I'm going to call on you. Fair warning.
I'll jump off. It's Crystal. Hi. It was shocking to me how I apparently don't play well in the political realm. That box was noticeably empty compared to others.
Thanks, Crystal. To add a question to what Letarik just said, I'm curious if a name appeared on your 6 degrees sheet that was surprising to you.
I'll jump in and say that I remember that one of my friends works like in the entertainment industry. And then I thought, well, if she works in the entertainment industry, basically that means I have access to any celebrity ever through a second or third degree connection, because it's such a weird, small world. So that's a good reminder too of, like, not just who knows who, but who knows what networks. And that's a much bigger radius too.
Right.
You can also drop in the chat if you want. I remember doing this many years ago, like maybe 15 years ago, with a group of women, and it was surprising how many times Michelle and Barack Obama showed up within 2 or 3 degrees separation. Someone knew someone who knew someone. And not that it's actionable today to be able to, like, I can't pick up the phone and call Michelle Obama, but this kid who lived in my house when she was a summer intern for the Sadie Nash Leadership Project, like literally 15 years ago. Fast forward, she worked for Michelle Obama's chief of staff. So I'm 1 degree, or is that considered 2 or 1? What do you think, Isis? Letarik? 2, maybe 2 degrees removed. And I'm maybe going to see her this week. So, I've got this book coming out. I'm going to ask. Who else wants to share something? So that was a surprise to me, like, wow, it's kind of amazing when you do something like this. Tootie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I love this exercise, although it requires those of us who are more seasoned to spend, actually had to go back into my contacts and actually, like, what's that person's name? And what are they still doing now? But yes, I have, as I've transitioned to different places and sectors, I don't have as much people in education or faith-based. But obviously lots of people in philanthropy and foundation and business. Yeah, and I've never, and it also made me realize how there's so many people I haven't really asked for help, on, supporting some of the good work that I believe in the world. So that was a aha moment. There's lots of people who I think, I've done a lot of things for, and I'm sure they would want to help me in my good causes too. So that was kind of a little aha moment.
It can help to do this in a group, like if you are part of a giving circle already, or a book group, or any, I don't know, a regular friends out dinner group, it can help because it just sort of gets you kind of going, as you talk about it and things spark. So Susan, thanks for putting that in the chat. Like, if it feels like a little bit, I'm not really getting a lot, even just doing it with a couple friends can really help generate some ideas. Anyone else want to share something before we hop over? Claire, how about you? I warned you.
I knew that was coming. Yeah, it was actually really interesting. Mine were, of course, more heavily in business and also philanthropy. And the one thing I did notice, similar to some of the other folks, is that I didn't have a lot in the political or the faith-based realms.
Interesting.
But it did spark a lot of ideas for people I could reach out to, to support Philanos or philanthropy together in a broader way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the origin of the 6 degrees exercise, but it doesn't take long to figure out a connection to even the most well-known, well-connected person out there. So we have a little time, and Isis thought it might be useful to talk about, like, how do you make an ask? Like, so I'll just use my example. Like, I have a connection for Michelle Obama. She has no idea who I am, what's coming. But I have a connection to her, actually two. And I'm not using this connection every day, right? So I'm going to be very judicious about how to get my ask in. But the publisher of my book published her book when she was at Penguin Random House. And Molly Stern left Penguin Random House to start Zando, and Zando's the one that bought my book. So that's a pretty good connection. And then, like I said, this kid who's now no longer a kid, who lived in my house for a summer, was like the second in the chief of staff office when Michelle Obama was first partner in the White House. So I've never, kind of asked this woman who lived here for a favor, but since I've got this thing happening in my life, I'm gonna ask. And I think that's one thing, obviously, that you have to think about. Like, you have people on your list, on your 6 degrees of separation worksheet, but not everyone is the right ask for everything, and not but people also have the right to say no. Like, sometimes those of us who work with individual donors, Tootie knows this really well. There's this weird gatekeeper thing that we can get sort of stuck in, and obviously it's important to think about and be thoughtful about it, because if you are in a position where you know people who know people or whatever, you can't just like abuse that relationship. But people who are donors or wealthy or connected or in Hollywood, as Isis was mentioning, they have free will. They can make decisions. They can say yes, they can say no. They can say, stop coming to me with this thing, or they can say, I'm really not interested, but thanks for bringing it to my attention. There's a lot of I don't think, sometimes I've seen in our sector that people can get a little bit too into that gatekeepery role, which is not really my vibe, and I don't really think that's a giving circle vibe. I mean, the analogy I sometimes use is, it's kind of a goofy one, but like, if you have a friend and they're wearing a really pretty dress, or a sweater, some of your friends will say, hey, I got it on sale at this store, here's the label, and others of your friends won't even tell you what that what this shirt or sweater is, or what the recipe is for that really great thing that they made, or the lipstick they're wearing. And I think that's something that I think all of us can practice doing a little bit more, is sharing and being sort of sharing the wealth in a way. Obviously with being a little bit judicious about it, but in a way that is trying to achieve the bigger goals of what we're trying to do in the world. Isis or Letarik, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that, related both to your comment and what Vincent shared with us in the chat, is that part of what this exercise also does is it really forces you to reckon with like how you've been socialized around help. And it's like, as a younger person who I'm not native to tech, but basically have been. And so whether that's like how I order groceries or the interactions I have at coffee shops and just automation, what I have noticed is that like older generations are socialized to help in different ways. And so what I would probably reach to Google for, and I noticed this like at the Apple store last week as I was dropping something off at the Genius Bar. Is that like something I probably would have easily Googled? I saw an older gentleman like made an appointment to go ask an expert a question about. And I think even beyond that, it help takes different forms across class and across race, and either brings you closer to community or away from that. And part of the reason why we had done a little bit of that grounding earlier in community around solidarity is that like solidarity is not always just about like who you're linking arms with, not necessarily just the alongside, as much as it is like also identifying who's in front of you and the people who have come before you, and who's behind you and the people who will hopefully take up their role soon after you. So that's it. Isis, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you two so much. This was just a lightning fast round of inspiration. I saw so much good stuff happening in the chat. I'm inspiring folks. So thank you both for sharing. And I hope everyone, if you didn't take the time to do the activity right now, I really hope you do it. It really only needs to take 10 or 15 minutes. You'll be surprised at how many names you can write down in that time. Pull up your LinkedIn, pull up your social media, go through your Rolodex, look through your old email contact list. It's so inspiring to see how many people you're connected to, and then think on behalf of your giving circle or other collective group, how can you then leverage all of those ties and relationship for their support and benefit? How can you then be that one bridge connection to open up so many more gates? So thank you for coming to today's session. Next up, we have an incredible session called Tell Authentic Stories, the Power of Genuine Listening and Ethical Narratives. We also have a 2-question poll popping up right now on the screen, so please fill that out. It really helps us better understand how you're enjoying all of the session content. To get to the next session, you have to go back into Whova and click the link. So exit this Zoom screen, go back into Whova, click the next link. We'll start every session on the hour at the hour. And we're so grateful for all of you being in this space with us today. And we'll see you on the next session. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Letarik. See you both soon.